Hey, Jim.
Good evening, man.
How are you?
Doing really well.
That is,
Doing really well.
well, that's fantastic. Welcome to episode 11, man. We made it into the double digits.
No.
I'm
Well
personally
into the
pretty,
double digits. I love it.
man, I, for a minute there, I didn't know if we were going to make it, but I'm pretty excited to say that we've made it into the double digits. So, episode 11, I'm pretty excited about the topic tonight. It's preventative maintenance is dead. Long live proactive system monitoring. Being an IT guy in my past life, this one's close to my heart. So
Mm.
that's the topic for tonight. But before we jump into the meat of the conversation, how you been? How you been for the last month? What's shaking in
Good.
Long Island?
Been good. You know what? In the morning, I hear birds, and that's a big deal for me. I love when spring is coming back. It's getting a little warmer, of course, like we had like a few 50, 60s days, and then today it snowed an inch. So it teases us a little bit, but we're getting there. We're getting there. The birds are back. I'm happy about that. How about
So
yourself?
the birds go away in the wintertime. When it gets
Oh,
real
yeah.
cold, you don't hear any chirping. So
Real cold,
that
real
means
quiet.
there's some sun around the corner, right?
That's right. That's the hope anyway. That's the
That's
hope.
the hope. Yeah.
And then it's that impatient game where it's like you have one day in 60-degree weather, you're like, all right, we're here. Spring is here, fantastic, ready to go. And then you get an inch of snow. So
Yeah. We don't really get that experience here in sunny Arizona, the Valley of the Sun. But I will say we are in the weird, fitful time for Arizona where it. I mean, our winter is like this tiny little bit of time, and that something you probably wouldn't even necessarily refer to as a winter.
mhm.
And then it's like we don't get much of a spring, and it goes right into summer. So we're experiencing spring as it is known in Arizona right now. But spring in Arizona is a fitful ride between way too warm for March and way too cold for March. So we'll go from one day where it's like, and I do realize the numbers I'm about to share with you are going to potentially upset you, but that's okay. We'll go from like a 60-degree day, which is like, that's cold for us Arizonans.
Oh, oh, that's like
Yep.
shorts weather.
Yep.
But go on. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Like 55, 60 is a high to like 90
Oh, in March?
in March. We've already had
Oh,
a couple of
wow.
like 87, 88, 89-degree days in March. So I'm saying like, oh, great. We're back to 55, 60. Pull out the hoodies again, get the long pants out, right? To now it's 90 and we're like, "Oh my god, get this stuff off of me." We're back to shorts and tank tops and sandals weather. And it does this for like a month to a month and a half. And then when it's done freaking out and trying to figure out who it is,
Mhm.
it'll just go straight to 100 degrees. Like boom. And then
Okay.
and then summer,
It gets
you
past
know,
it's existential crisis, and then it figures out, oh yeah, I'm Arizona, baby. Let's
I'm
do it.
Arizona, bring the heat. That's
Right.
right. Sometimes the heat comes in April, sometimes it waits till May to be really consistent, but we're in that
Oh,
we're in that existential crisis moment right now. So, um with that said, hiking is still amazing, jeeping is still
mm,
amazing. I recently may have hurt my Jeep on a trail, and that has prevented me from using it for the last couple of weeks. But I'm happy to say that on Saturday we replaced the parts that were preventing use, and looking forward to taking advantage of the weather while it's still here, because I will say
awesome.
once it gets in that 100-degree plus range in Arizona, you typically don't want to be out in your vehicle climbing around. So
Yeah, I imagine if anything goes wrong, that's bad news, because then you gotta figure out how to push your vehicle up a mountain in 114-degree weather or something.
And there it is. Those are the decision-making things that come into play in Arizona. Like, but what happens if I break down? We're not worried about like calling AAA. We're not worried about do we have enough food or water. We're like, I don't want to be out in 120-degree weather while it's broken down.
Get it.
So that's about it, man. It's been a breakneck quarter so far in a month, working a lot of great stuff going on. Trying to get some downtime on the weekends, going out to San Diego next week for
very good
for some family time, and that's about it, man.
That's awesome. My Iris, my daughter, turned 8 over the weekend. And so she's like a sports beast. She's a monster. She wanted to, it's still wintry here, but she wanted to play sports with her friends. And so we rented out an indoor sports complex. It was the most fun time I've had. But I made the mistake of trying to play soccer with a bunch of 8-year-olds. And I could overpower them. I could get them out of the way. But I cannot stop like they can stop because they're like 60 pounds. I'm a little bit more than that. And so whereas we're running the same speed, and I was proud of myself for keeping up with them, but when they turn, it's like they turn on a dime, and I'm taking a few more steps to slow myself down and then turn. So
it's like driving a Porsche versus
yes.
I'm not going to suggest what vehicle you're representing. I'm going to give that up to
you. You can call me a family truckster. I think that's
a minivan, if you will.
But it's like a sporty station wagon. Like a Dodge.
Definitely.
Like a
stow and go. Lots of features. Lots of features.
Exactly. And I got plenty of space, so it was great. But yeah, then the next day I was moving a little slower than I normally do in the morning.
So explain this to me. What is an indoor sporting arena? Like what I've not heard of this. What are you understand?
Just picture a huge hangar or garage, and it's just turf, right? And so if you're a soccer player and you need some place to play soccer during the winter to stay in shape, you can rent out this place. It's got an indoor soccer field with turf, and they set up goals. And so we rented out an indoor soccer field. It's great. It was so fun.
So the kids, it's an indoor soccer field.
Yeah.
For
protected
soccer.
From the elements, climate controlled, and you just go and have fun.
No 1 inch of snow coming down.
No, exactly. And we wore shorts. It was great. Everyone loved wearing shorts.
Well, to stay
we don't get that a lot in March in New York. I understand it doesn't make sense, in 90-degree Arizona stories, but in New York right now, shorts, we're not quite at short weather. So
yeah, I appreciate it. I do like pictures and diagrams. It helps me understand these foreign concepts. So. All right. Well, the story took a turn. See what I did there with the car analogy.
Appreciate it. Yeah. Too soon, but
too soon. A little too soon. It's all right.
Yeah. Still limping a bit, but
it's funny. All right. So I'm sorry, but I'm going to stay on this for one more second. There was this time, and I'm gonna remove names to maintain anonymity. Okay. But there was this time where I was with this crew of people. I may or may not have been driving. That is still open for debate.
Sure.
But it was a minivan. Stow and go, lots of features.
Yes.
Okay. And I think this highlights the whole story. All right. We were in Florida. We had a big, wide road, lots of turning capability. And the driver, I almost said but I want to say the driver thought that it would be fun to whip this minivan around fully loaded with toolboxes and fully grown men as if it were a Porsche. What do you think happened when going 40 miles an hour or so, and you take a turn as if this thing is a Porsche, so you can, because you're like, oh, this is going to be great. You're going to you're going to slide into this turn. Everybody's going to be impressed. No. Turned the wheel popped, and you just kept going forward the way that you were going, right? Thankfully, there was tons of room. We didn't hit anybody. We didn't hit anything. We just stopped in the road. But it was hilarious because it's like car moving forward, turned. The car never actually turned. It just popped in the wheel and kept right on going straight the way that it was. Now, I think that highlights, fully featured stow and go minivan, trying to act like a Porsche. That's what you're going to get out of it, right? Now, I will say, we changed that tire faster than the NASCAR pit crew. I was very proud of the team on that one. But okay.
Wow. So that's awesome.
Let's get to the topic at hand. But before we do, I would like to cheers you, my friend, to episode 11, double digits, on time start of the podcast today.
Yes.
Here's to you, my friend.
Absolutely. You too, brother. Salute.
What are you drinking?
Where could be apple juice. Maybe it could be Maker's Mark as well. I don't know. I'm not choosing.
I do like to drink my apple juice out of very fancy glasses. I will say.
Yes. And that is a beautiful glass.
Thank you. This is my grandfather's Scotch glass. And this is Scotch, single malt. I'm just going to own that right there. Scotch. Yep. Scotch, right? All right, my friend. Topic of the day.
Yes.
Proactive maintenance is dead. Long live proactive monitoring. No. I got that wrong. I said it wrong. Didn't I? Yes. Preventative maintenance is dead.
Yes.
So
long live proactive system monitoring. Yes.
So I love this because we're taking this in the context of AV rooms, audiovisual systems. We are talking about when an integrator or a service provider delivers a room, how do you support that? And historically and traditionally, one of the common services that have been provided is preventative maintenance. What is let's take a minute to define what preventative maintenance is from your perspective, from our perspective.
So preventive maintenance is always, in my opinion, having a periodically set of physical visits to a site where there's nothing wrong with the system. All you are doing there is going in, interviewing the client, staying apprised of what their needs are, how their current needs are being met, how the current systems are doing. Is there anything funky? Is there anything else they need? It's almost like a sales call masked as a maintenance visit. And so that was, for me, that was always the first part is getting to know the users. Then you go in, you do a function test of the system. Maybe if you're super fancy, you add some elements of like a commissioning checklist and you do some performance testing. So just to not only test out functions, but go through, make sure nothing's hot to the touch, make sure there's no hum heard, make sure there's no distortion. And then in addition to the functional performance testing, you do some cleaning. That it was the silliest thing, and so many AV people think it was beneath them. But man, when we used to leave a rack that was next to like a dish line in a cafeteria of a school, and it was just gunked up and everything, after a PM visit, we would leave. It'd be pristine and new filters, and all the dust would be clean. It was like we were made of gold. Like the clients absolutely love that. And so that is a maintenance visit.
More importantly, your equipment loved that.
Yeah, 100%. And you do this when there's nothing wrong. You get to know the system. You get to know the clients. You're viscerally aware of what's going on with it. And then if you're even fancier than cleaning it and doing the performance testing, you track it and review it yearly with your client to see if there's any changes that need to be made. And so it is not a reactive maintenance where you're reacting to break fix. It's a proactive type engagement where you're sending people to go there, exercise the system, care for it, and make sure it's not going to go down prematurely. That's my opinion of what it is.
I think that's spot on. At least the way you summarized it there at the end. When you first started, you were kind of bringing in some sales elements, some relationship elements, some customer success kind of elements, which
it's always a touch,
which is great. Yeah, no, it's a preventative maintenance is an opportunity to bolt on some relationship maintenance. And so where, because I can be a little bit more literal, right? When I'm thinking of preventative maintenance, I'm like just focused on the system side of it, which for me anyway, just defining it for me. And it's interesting because you can also look at it as operational readiness is another form of preventative maintenance, in the idea that you want to make sure the room works before somebody actually uses it and has an issue with it. So I know a number of clients that have spent the time, money, resources in personnel to go around to every single one of their rooms every single day and do a function test as a operational readiness test. And that to me is a form of preventative maintenance as well. Because if I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about it not just from a service provider or an integrator's perspective, a provider's perspective, but also from an end user or an owner's perspective that might be doing their own preventative maintenance, essentially. But you summarized it, I think, perfectly well there at the end, in that the business outcome is taking care of the equipment proactively to then try to prevent issues from coming up and causing a loss of meeting or causing a lack of service or service disruption, right? Rescheduling, all the things that come with that.
Yes.
It's interesting because one of the things that I'm trying to do today during this podcast for me is agree with the title or disagree with the title of our podcast, in recognizing, is preventative maintenance truly dead, or is it just a new and different understanding of it? And hopefully by the end we can explore that a little bit further. But I found it interesting because monitoring, in a sense, was being done through proactive maintenance visits. We were just using human beings to do the monitoring.
IRL, in real life.
IRL. Wow, thanks, acronyms. Yeah, thank you for defining the acronym as well. Very important. This industry is full of them. LOL. So those familiar with monitoring. Okay, so proactive maintenance, a human being in AV, right? A human being shows up to the space, shows up to the system, runs it through its paces, makes sure that it's still functioning as intended, and potentially doing some cleaning. And I will say, I want to kind of earmark that, because I think that cleaning piece in larger, more complex AV systems that still have a lot of those types of devices, there could still be some value there in saying that proactive or preventative maintenance, cleaning maintenance, is still a thing. It'll be interesting to explore if the tool sets out there from a monitoring perspective would enable one to accomplish the same thing, and thus recognize when something needs to be cleaned through the gathering of data from a monitoring perspective. Now, with that said, I'm getting ahead of myself. So I feel like we've defined preventative maintenance. So give me your take on proactive monitoring.
So proactive monitoring, I would say, is largely an automated process that is always on, always there. And it is, done typically through the network, through a variety of different tools and ports and avenues. And so there are a set of triggers in the system, and if one of those triggers is fired, you immediately know that something is offline. You immediately know that a call failed or something, and it can escalate that. What would you say, that event to all the required people? Yeah.
That was good. So automated heartbeat, right? What's the status
Mhm.
of devices, right? It's interesting because I think you covered a couple of pieces there. There's monitoring of devices. Is that device online? It's also
Mhm.
worth noting right here that in order for you to be able to monitor something, it needs to be connected to a network, right?
Yes. And
Today's
probably an external network, right?
not necessarily. I mean, there's definitely people that have their own monitoring infrastructures.
Mhm.
Remember, we're blending IT and AV in this moment right here because it's worth noting that proactive monitoring has been a thing in IT for years and years and years.
Right.
Having all of your switch infrastructure and your server infrastructure and your endpoints all available in a single pane of glass to know the health of those things, that not only includes monitoring, but also management, remote management of those devices, being able to push firmware and patching and essentially manage those devices without having to deploy a human being to the device itself, right? So there's that. But then you hit on service monitoring, which is not just a device thing, but did a call fail? And it's worth noting that because back in the day, not very long ago, a call existed between a device and a device, two endpoints on a network, right? Now those calls go out to a cloud service like a Teams call or a Zoom call or a rendezvous call like we're on right now
Right.
for our Wirecast infrastructure. So it's the device could be online and functioning properly, but the service itself could cause a call to fail, which is interesting. So, really thinking through what are the different things that you can monitor. So we got to find a way to summarize it though. What's the right way to summarize proactive monitoring? It's an automated machine driven way to understand health and status and fair to say operational readiness of not only a device but an entire system, potentially inclusive of additional services outside of that room that system depends on for its functionality.
I'm good with it.
It also, to your point, enables proactive alerting, right? So, when you mentioned, and I was thinking through this right as you were describing, like worst case scenario, right? You go out, you do a preventative maintenance visit, you blow out the projector. Hopefully, you're not dealing with that anymore, but you blow out the projector, you do a test of the system, everything checks out fine, and the very next day something breaks. There's no way to catch that.
Yep.
With monitoring, the hope is that you would be able to catch that potentially before, and obviously even with proactive monitoring, you can't prevent everything from happening, but the idea is to give you that much more observability and visibility of the overall health of devices and the services that support the business outcome for whatever system it is that you're monitoring, in a way that allows you to potentially correct the issue before it has a business impact. And
Well,
you
and
mentioned
so
alert. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, no, and that's where I think it's still gray between monitoring and preventive maintenance, because with monitoring, you are at the mercy of those triggers and those ties that the manufacturers give you, right? In their APIs and whatever. Like, um, uh, and I guess the same is true for preventive maintenance, but you can also get somewhat predictive with preventive maintenance if you include those performance tests. And so an example is if you track the temperature of devices. And typically, as devices are about to fail, they heat up. And so if you're there every quarter, and Q1 you measure it, it's 70 degrees on its face, no problem. Q2, 80 degrees, all right, maybe gives you pause. Q3, it's at 97 degrees. You have that historical data, hasn't failed yet, but because it's been heating up pretty consistently over the past 6 months, it's time to replace it before it actually fails. So you can get predictive. And then the other nice thing is it's kind of the same when you're measuring hum or hiss or something like, before a mixer is about to fail, a lot of those performance variables will start to degrade. And I don't know if there's a way to monitor system signal to noise or and temperature. Some manufacturers provide it, others don't, but you're at the mercy of the manufacturer. Whereas if you're physically there in a preventive maintenance capacity, you can get eyes on, hands on.
You're making a really good point right now. And I was sitting here thinking, I'm like, well, but there are plenty of devices that do provide internal temperature available as a metric. And you absolutely could be doing proactive threshold monitoring and predictive monitoring.
Yeah. And that's super sad. And don't get me wrong, there are some manufacturers that give you impedance measurements on amplifiers. There are some manufacturers that you can kind of guess the electrical noise through their APIs, but they're few and far between. That's the exception. It's not really the rule.
Well, but I'm thinking like, okay, so maybe that's interesting. So maybe the once a year I'm pulling out all the surgical tools and validating this system versus operational readiness, right? Operational readiness, the daily checks,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
So maybe it's appropriate to say, at least at this point in the conversation where we're at right now, because this is incredible. We're exploring. Might say that, okay, you could definitely replace the daily checkups with a proactive monitoring solution, because at that point,
I'm fine with that. Yep.
You've got a pane of glass you can look at. You can check that you can look at an entire infrastructure potentially globally from a single pane of glass and understand the health of your system. And then if that's still your job is to, oh, hey, room 7 over in building 2, I've got a yellow alert on that. I'm going to spend my time going and focusing in on the room that's telling me there's an issue versus going around to every single one of them, because I've got a really nice tool that's telling us it's healthy. But exactly. I cannot think of a way without putting a dedicated XL2 in every single room, which I think is ridiculous, to measure some of the signal to noise ratio. Some of those things that can drive a trending failure, right? But I would also argue that there's a ton of stuff you can't get even being in the room that you can get from a proactive monitoring perspective that actually does the same thing. For example, what if you see RAM utilization in a device going up and up and up and up over time, right? Or CPU overload over time.
Yep.
Right. We had an issue, it's been a couple of years ago, right, where we had an executive boardroom, and you know what I'm talking about. This was a painful one.
Stupid touch panel, man.
Well, it wasn't the touch panel. It wasn't the touch panel. It was the processor. The processors, really? Yes, the processors, the processor's processor was loading itself over time. And after reviewing logs, we could see that it would get to a point where it would just shut itself down into a frozen state. Yep, and had we had a proactive monitoring solution in place there to be able to see that trend over time, those thresholds, it would have hit a threshold. It wouldn't have failed. It would have let us know that, hey, your CPU usage is way, way up on this particular device. You might want to watch that. the potential to have caught that and corrected it and understand what the issue is could have happened a lot sooner than reviewing the logs later. And that's not something that somebody is going to see in the room, right? Without having some sort of machine learning in place that can be looking at so many various data points and metrics and mapping that over a trend and, establishing thresholds, expectations.
Yeah. But now, so let me ask you this, because I'm going to say two things, but it's kind of along the same lines. Do you find that manufacturers give you the tools by default that allow you to get that granular and that predictive, or do you think you would need to kind of roll your own scripts to get that information and monitor that information?
Okay, now go ahead. Now finish your thought.
Yeah, because and in my brain, I don't know that RAM usage would automatically send a remote trigger by default in this processor, but I'm sure there's an API in there that would let us monitor it and pull it ourselves. And then it got me thinking about two very large financial institutions that we know and love that created their own daily system test. Like they manually automated it. They wrote their own control system program to do this, where to test every microphone in the system. Every night at 3 a.m., they would blast pink noise into the room and unmute every mic one at a time in the system to make sure it was reading the noise, and it had an appropriate level registering in its meter. And after it did that, okay, all mics are online, that room is good. So that's not an automatic feature that is included in the system. That's something that they rolled their own. And so my question to you is, do you think that these monitoring systems can be baked, or are their manufacturers going to be siloed where you can get it as long as you stay in the same manufacturer, or are people going to have to put their own smarts into it, write their own scripts, create their own dashboards, and do like a special sauce type of approach?
Man, you have hit on so many fundamental challenges in our particular industry, and you've asked multiple questions. So let's try to take them one at a time. If I was to answer it from a what's the current state of our industry from a proactive monitoring perspective, and Gain put a comment in on the book of faces about most DSPs allowing you to monitor any of their variables. But it's worth noting that is that through a proprietary piece of software?
Right.
This is one of the pieces of the question that you asked, right?
Yes.
There's a ton of monitoring software in our industry that is specific to a single manufacturer's ecosystem.
Yes.
Right? You might have a DSP manufacturer, you use their tools, and you can monitor all kinds of information. But now if I want to go look at another piece of my infrastructure, I've got to go pull up a different tool. And if I want to look at a third piece of my infrastructure, I need to look at another tool. I'm arguing for the idea of a single pane of glass to be able to monitor all information from your ecosystem. And so you have to choose what's the information that's important for me to have at my fingertips. Tom put a really good question into Facebook, but we'll get to that in a second. This exact same thing happened in the world of IT, right? You had switch manufacturers and you had software developers that provided tools that allowed you to monitor their tools. And then something magical happened. Standardization happened. Something called SNMP, right?
Yes.
Simple Network Management Protocol. This is a protocol that allows a manufacturer to make a number of variables, a number of data points or metrics about their device, about their service, available to be consumed by anybody's monitoring platform. Hurrah. Now all of a sudden there's a monitoring platform that allows me to monitor a multiple vendor environment.
Well, platform or protocol?
Protocol that enables a single platform.
Yes.
Through using that. So now I'm not having to pull up 4 different monitoring tools to actually get the entire health of my infrastructure. I'm able to pull up a single platform or monitoring tool that uses industry standard protocol.
Yes.
That allows you to pull that information forward, right? And so this is a plea, if you will, to the manufacturers of the AV industry to follow in the footsteps of our IT brethren in creating standardized protocol, observability protocols that allow really relevant information about your devices, about your services, to be available for monitoring tools to pick up. So the question now is, it depends. Some manufacturers, some forward-thinking AV manufacturers, are making information available through standard protocols like SNMP. Many of them are not. Many of them are requiring you to either use their own proprietary tools, because that's the way of the AV, right? It seems to be the way of the AV. But it's worth noting that many of them have APIs. Like you mentioned, there's an API, there's a protocol in place that allows you to script something that allows you to pull that data off. But to your point, like this unnamed financial entity that you brought up earlier, there's some lifting there. It requires some custom scripting to get the information that you need out of it. I'm arguing that the value that you get out of having a single pane of glass, a single platform that allows you to monitor all your tools, is worth the custom scripting. And I think the bigger answer to that for me is partner with a provider that has already gone down this path, that has already written scripts for a number of devices within the AV industry, a number of services within our AV industry, and leverage the work that they've already done, as opposed to trying to write the script yourself. That's, in my opinion, where we're headed as an industry, is breaking down the silos of manufacturers and being able to have a truly unified observability platform that, yes, is going to require work to configure, but once you have configured it, it's like you have 1,000 people visiting 1,000 rooms every 5 seconds. Right.
Well, that's been our job as integrators from the get, right? I mean, it's where we're integrating and fostering communication between different devices from different manufacturers. It's just another layer on top of that.
You're exactly right. I was even thinking earlier when you were talking about preventative maintenance. A monitoring tool is configurable in terms of how often you pull information off of a device or service. But let's just say, for the sake of our conversation, a typical one might be every 5 seconds or every 10 seconds. You're pulling data, you're finding out the health of a device, you're finding out the health of a service. In going back to the analogy of the preventative maintenance visit, you're essentially getting a 6-month, if you do 2 preventative maintenance visits a year, it's a 6-month pulse of data coming back from that room to check its viability and its health, versus, I mean, how many seconds are in a year? Like, you'd have to do that. I'm sure you can.
I know how many minutes from the Rent song, but I know there's 525,600 minutes. How do you measure a year? Seasons of love, my friend. That's what I'm
Wow.
saying.
Yeah.
Season of
This
love.
is me blankly staring back at you. I'm sorry. You lost me
All
there.
right. Yeah. No, but yeah.
So I don't know.
Yes.
Did I answer your question?
No, you did, and I think it's an exciting thing because it gives us as integrators a big opportunity to get on that, either partnering with someone, rolling our own. I think that's very exciting. And a lot of people on Facebook are saying that it is a pain in the neck when manufacturers don't open SNMP information, and they people get upset when manufacturers try to keep everything in their same ecosystem or make you pay for it so that you can have access to their cloud monitoring tool, even though it only deals with that one manufacturer. And it is short-sighted of manufacturers to do so, because I'm sure they want, right? The reasoning is, oh, if we do this and we make this awesome tool, they're only going to come to us and they're only going to use our equipment. But no one does that. This is the world we live in, where we're integrators. We're constantly selecting pieces from different manufacturers that fit this specific need. So you have to have um, that non-proprietary solution that people can get into. So it's in their best interest, financially and reputationally, to just open everything up and play nice with others.
Well,
Yeah.
go ahead. No, go ahead. You're on a roll.
Yeah, I was going to say, to your point about having that system feedback every second versus twice a year, that's where I do get nervous, because you still need that human touch and that's what we're talking about, right? If we're just talking about the the technical preventive maintenance, yes, 100%. Having that constant pulse on the system, you can't fight that. But at the same time, if monitoring completely replaces preventive maintenance, we lose a tremendous opportunity in the industry to get another human interaction with our clients and with the systems. So it's not only great to have that periodic visit with them, which could be satisfied by sales, but if people aren't interested in seeing a salesperson at that time, as I'm sure we've all been there before, but if you're coming under the guise of preventive maintenance, and you are going to do maintenance, having that touch is huge. And you also have a technician that is staying current with that particular system. We have drawings, we have operation manuals, but knowing the system, knowing the site, knowing the people can save so much headache, down the line, rather than just having that automated system.
Okay. I challenge you here, because using preventative maintenance, and I'm going to use your words,
Yes,
as a guise for creating a touch point with the customer, is serving your outcome. How is that serving the customer's outcome?
I'm glad you asked, because it is well agreed upon that the advantages of preventive maintenance are less equipment downtime, longer asset life. I'm looking this up and reading, so forgive me. Fewer interruptions to critical operations, and improved efficiency. Assets in good condition perform better. So you are providing that service by exercising, by having a trained professional exercise the system, taking a look at those performance measurements that might not be able, or might not be available over SNMP or over an API. So there is value in the visit. There's an added bonus to everyone, in that there is a sales element to it. And even if you don't want to do sales, like a full-on sales call, staying engaged with the client, like keeping on top of their needs and just talking with them, you can consider it marketing, you can consider it sales, but there's something there that is good for both parties. It's not sneaky, it's an added bonus.
All right. I'll buy that for $3. Um, I would just argue that there's other ways to stay in touch with the client and create those opportunities for customer success and sales without it feeling like it has to be attached to proactive maintenance. Because again, while I do agree that there's value that comes along with those things, there's significant value that comes along with monitoring devices and systems that preventative maintenance can never touch, right?
Yes.
There might be some aspects, and that's what it feels like. We're getting to this point where it's like there are some things that a person in the room with the right set of tools cannot be replaced by machine learning, proactive monitoring.
Yes. And I think,
and vice versa.
and
There's
vice versa.
value that proactive monitoring can provide that somebody in a room can never provide. That's giving me, like, you're an executive CEO. I don't know a CEO that's not executive, so just leave me alone on that one.
Gotcha.
But you're a CEO in a boardroom using the room, and I'm able to see the health of the system from a proactive monitoring perspective. You're not sending some AV technician into that room while the system is being utilized, right? So my whole point to that is there's value you can get out of proactive monitoring that would never be able to be replaced by a preventative maintenance approach.
Yes.
Live in real life, human being
Yes.
on site, scheduling nightmare, taking rooms down for that process.
100%.
You sounded like you had something you wanted to add there.
I wanted to say that I think my takeaway is slowly becoming, we need remote monitoring. We need that component of it. But I don't think that it can completely replace preventive maintenance.
So let's
well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. You had a double and.
I had a double end.
You had a double end. Go ahead.
The double end is that it can be a business decision, because I think you could make the argument that every system, as long as the dollars and cents make sense, two different senses. One was CENTS, one was SENC. You
Thank
get
you.
it.
The listener's going to appreciate that clarification.
No, they're with me. They know what I'm talking about. So for huddle spaces, for run-of-the-mill things, I think you can get away with a monitoring solution there and not skip a beat without having preventive maintenance. But for the mission critical systems where you need, I think that's what it comes down in my brain. The more mission critical a space is to the operation of an organization, the more likely it will benefit from having a human technician go in and exercise that system periodically.
Okay, here's some challenge to your statement. You said huddle rooms and run-of-the-mill systems. Let's define run-of-the-mill a little bit. Are we talking small, medium conference room type stuff?
And so when I think,
are we talking
I'm going to widen out this conversation a little bit. Like, if we start really paying attention to how rooms are used and applying like room use analytics, and we can really get a sense of how efficient.
Which, by the way, proactive monitoring is the way to accomplish.
True.
Another value point.
What we can do is start to track the efficiencies of rooms, and for those run-of-the-mill rooms where we have many of them deployed, as long as they're all running at 80% or something like that during business hours, if one goes down, it's not going to be a showstopper, because you will more than likely have another very similar room within a floor or two. And so it's not going to ruin someone's day if they've got to go downstairs for a meeting and rebook a room if it fails. But in like a $2 million NPR, where if anything goes wrong in that room, you're going to lose like $1 million a day. That's a room I want to have boots on the ground, touching and making sure everything looks and smells great.
So, okay, I agree with you. For once, I agree with you in this conversation. I agree with you. That was a good clarification there. And I would argue that if you've got a $2 million NPR, you want proactive monitoring to catch anything that you might get from proactive monitoring.
100%.
The ability to see what's
100%.
going on, analytics, usage, all the wonderful things. And we haven't even touched on remote management of devices that is also enabled through remote monitoring, which the preventative maintenance tech cannot touch. Again, just something in the plus column of
why not?
We're talking in real life. I've got a role. Yeah, the in real life person can definitely go patch firmware or upgrade or manage a device in the room. I'm talking about managing at scale remotely.
Oh, yeah. Well played. Fair enough. Touche.
You go one at a time per room versus potentially being able to push out a configuration change to, I don't know, like even 200 rooms is probably enough value. Maybe even like 8 rooms is enough value to the. All right.
Well played, Mr. Elson.
Thank you. Cheers. Cheers. You know I love you. Okay. Those rooms need both. The big rooms, the NPR rooms, they need both. It's too critical. They're too complex. There's too much going on in there. But that's the one room, right? It's the 437 other run-of-the-mill rooms, as you indicated, that might be the perfect candidate to drop preventative maintenance from and go over to a proactive monitoring, because the value proposition is so high from a proactive monitoring, remote management and monitoring perspective for those rooms. And I would also argue, or at least posit, that happened in our industry, that the types of devices and solutions that are going into those rooms are consolidated, might be a good word here.
Commoditized. Yeah.
It's a word I'm not in love with, but it's a true word for that space. These all-in-one type solutions. There's a lot less components. I mean, man, I went out just as a quick, I went out to a survey for a customer last week with one of our new sales folks. They had about 8 rooms, 6 or 8 rooms that they wanted to upgrade. The same solution was the right solution for all 8 of those rooms. And it was a total of 3 devices. A display.
And wicked cheap. Yeah.
Wicked cheap. What used to be a $30,000 small conference room is now like a $10,000 fully installed, ready to rock, supported for a year. And so it made me again kind of look at the price of rolling a truck and sending a tech to a room like that versus placing a little edge device on the network that can pull that information. The value, in my opinion, is so heavily weighted towards the proactive monitoring. And again, we haven't even touched on the value of not only am I enabling proactive monitoring, issue resolution, alerting prior to knowing about it, hopefully before a user knows about it.
Yeah. And warning anyone who has scheduled meetings there.
100%, right? And the other thing that it's got, and we touched on this already, your preventative maintenance technician can't, while in the room, check the health of Zoom. The connectivity to Zoom, right? That's where machines coming in and being able to tie in multiple data sources into a single view of health, a single view of success. So it's interesting because now I'm kind of, I think we're landing on the point here. And I want to address a concern that you had, because you're concerned about, if we don't have preventative maintenance, how as a sales team, I've lost a potential touch point with my customer. But if we're pulling proactive maintenance data, now we have a set of data to share with our customers that we've never had before. And there's an opportunity to potentially quarterly touch base with that customer and present them with strategic information. Boom. Boom. So it's the same,
That's
right?
awesome.
There is an opportunity there to still have that touch point with the customer, but I have to concede your point, right? Especially in those bigger complex systems that have PA systems and big, large, complex audio. Like, you can't get away from the value. And at that point, if you've paid $2 million for an NPR, what's a couple few $1,000s a year for somebody to come out and check that thing and make sure that it's good to go? And also bolt on proactive monitoring and remote support, because geez, if it, and these are not real numbers, but they seem to make sense to me. If you could solve 80% of the issues that happen with the system remotely without having to roll a truck, I mean, number one, as a customer, I'm super happy. I don't have to schedule a room. You're able to do that at any time, anywhere. As an integrator or as a service provider, I'm real happy. I don't have to roll a truck. It's a more cost-effective way for me to be able to deliver. I can respond faster. I can correct issues faster. Seems to be win-win all the way around from that perspective.
Totally agreed. Totally agreed. And I love that idea of the quarterly performance review on a maintenance basis on deployed systems. That is baller. That is so cool. That is so cool.
I want to circle back around to a comment you made earlier, because we have some really forward-thinking folks on our live feed right now, and you made a point about, as integrators, we choose all kinds of different devices to create some sort of business outcome through the system that we deliver, right? I would argue that the world we're living in today, we should be choosing devices that not only provide that solution, but are also able to be monitored. And this comes back to that plea, right? Gain made a really good point of, true audio devices. What did he say? Most DSPs. He had another really good point here. SNMP is a true network. Is why true network audio devices, which there are few, are so useful. If I have to pick between something that plays nice with SNMP or doesn't, I'll pick them every time, right? And so I think, here's a guy who, in my opinion, is leading the industry from an audio DSP perspective. Like, those guys, the stuff that those guys are doing is off the charts. And they're giving they're giving so much consideration to the observability of their devices that they're making product decisions based off of that. I think that's an incredible indicator of the value of a monitoring platform, an observability platform. I like the word observability more than monitoring, because I think it really feels more appropriate from that perspective. And SNMP, right now, I don't have to use said DSP manufacturer software. I can use any platform that plays nicely with SNMP. Oh, you've got SolarWinds? Great, we'll use that. Oh, you've got Enable? Great, we use that. Oh, you have some crazy open source SNMP because there's like literally 1,000 of them out there? Great, you can use that and still get that data from the system.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things that's been coming forward with the work that we're doing in the monitoring side is playbook, runbook actions. Being able to use alerts and actually do a function that potentially gets the room back online. So now not only are we looking at proactive monitoring and alerting, but we're looking at having machines doing prescribed functions based on thresholds that potentially correct issues, right? We do live in a world of computers, and sometimes a reboot goes a long way, right?
Yeah. I went through a year and a half of a different large financial institution, but still a large financial institution, a year and a half worth of service tickets. And 30% of their issues were resolved by cycling power to something.
Yeah. Oh man.
So if you could put those rules in place, and once that threshold is met, that yes, it makes sense to reboot this device and just do it automatically.
And you could put parameters around
Yeah.
timelines, right? So don't do it in the middle of the day because it could be in the middle of a meeting, right? That's
Yes.
where adding
Unless the meeting's dead anyway. Like if you, and that's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of owning those parameters is if certain criteria are met where definitely no meeting going on, right? There's no call, displays can't turn on, blah blah. Then and no meeting scheduled. Like you can get as crazy you want. It's awesome,
bro. We're at an hour and 1 minute right now. This is the fastest time we've ever burned through our hour. Like I could talk about this for another hour, like no joke. So
good stuff.
with that, what's your takeaway, man? Like we want to keep this around an hour like we usually do.
Yes. My takeaway, I came in thinking that there was no way remote monitoring could ever replace the power of preventive maintenance. And I am walking away thinking every system needs remote monitoring. And I think it is business sense wise a better choice to just stick with PM services for the larger, more critical spaces. And that's my takeaway. How about yourself?
I think we're 100% aligned. That was my takeaway as well. You know, again, just recapping what you just said from a different perspective. What I've seen over the last 10 years is people investing a lot of money into what you called run of the mill rooms, right? So let's say I've got a building and I've got 10 rooms, 9 of them are standard, more basic conference rooms, and one of them is the big show wow room, right? Maybe it's the CEO's executive boardroom, maybe it's that big NPR space that you're spending a lot more money on. So using machines to monitor, manage, and potentially correct issues in those standard spaces is a significant cost-effective outcome for the customer while providing just an incredible slew of new data that both parties can benefit significantly from, thus still creating those touch points that we were so worried, potentially even creating more touch points, interestingly enough.
And better, like elevated touch point, like touch points that will elevate the AV industry in the eyes of technology owners and construction and architectural firms like that. I love that. I absolutely love that.
And now, as a customer, I want all that data for my big complex room as well, but it's so darn important because that might be where I win my deals, right? That might be where I have my partners and my customers come into. So I'm going to put a little extra juice and get a human on site once a year, maybe twice a year, depending, but I think once a year. My vote, my opinion, once a year. Right? Especially if I've got proactive monitoring in place. And what's interesting is the proactive monitoring might be able to reduce that preventative maintenance visit so that you're only focused on the things you can't measure from a machine.
Yeah. And yes, and maybe it's even a graded thing where it's once a year for the first 2-3 years and then twice a year after that because you're getting into the end of that system's life, something like that. I don't know, but that's really interesting.
Awesome.
Yes.
This has been an incredible conversation, and
So
man,
good, man.
thank you for thank you for the conversation. Thank you for being willing to share your thoughts and opinions and be challenged, and for challenging my thoughts and opinions. Like this has been incredible.
I agree more, man. This was awesome.
Well, big thank you to the folks that we had come in and listen. And if you haven't, please go to our YouTube channel, follow us there. This will be uploaded in the next couple of weeks if you want to watch it again because you were so enamored. And we also have a Spotify channel. So if you prefer to just listen to audio, appreciate all the comments and really look forward to being back here in about a month for our next conversation.
Absolutely.
Cheers to you, my friend.
Salud. Cheers all.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.